Hi. Going to give you the heads up. I am really tired. I have had a little over 4 hours of sleep. And I am trying to knock this out so I can get it online before I head to my mom's house, because when I get to her house, I am helping to remove wallpaper, painting stuff, and laying an entire floor where I will be pretty much the only one who can move the furniture. So, wow. So I am going to kind of through this. Don't you love those sound effects? I'm going to kind of highlight. So some of these I'm just going to make a couple of comments on and skip on past. I am making this as short as possible. I am just cramming everything into this one quick video. You have the textbook. These PowerPoints are also online for you. And I kept telling myself, or asking myself, do I really have to do the video? And technically, no, I don't. But since I started the quarter up doing these videos, it just seems wrong not to. So I'm doing it, but they are very much not in depth, and I apologize for that. It's just I am out of time, and yeah, so there you go. Sorry. I'll make it up to you, maybe, sort of. All right, so this one, I should go back. This one is control of body temperature and water balance, and so that's why it's now talking about the male emperor penguins and stuff like that. So, got a bunch of penguins trying to keep warm. Big ideas, thermoregulation. Thermo is going to be temperature. Regulation, hopefully you already know what regulation means. It means keeping it together. And then we have osmoregulation and excretion. So this is basically getting rid of your waste products. Thermoregulation. Homeostatic mechanism, how animals maintain an internal temperature, blah, blah, blah. So we already know this. I already said thermo is temperature. Regulation is keeping it where it's supposed to be, regulating it. Main thing here is your endotherms versus your ectotherms. Endo, En, enter. So these derive the body heat mainly from their metabolism. And then ecto absorb the heat from their surroundings. So this is going to be like a difference between a person and, say, an iguana. Big difference there. People do like to have something nice and toasty, but having a heat pad or a hot rock is not exactly the most important thing for a person, but it pretty much is for an iguana. I used to have an iguana, just so you know. So, heat exchange in the environment occurs by conduction, convection, radiation, and evaporation. So we've got some checkpoint questions. I've already answered some of these before because I've talked about in class when I talked about the negative feedback loop and I talked about temperature. So we've already talked about evaporation. We did not talk about convection, which is just simply the fan moving the air. That's why a convection oven is moving the air around. That's why it speeds up the heat. Don't know if you knew that. Endotherms and many ectotherms maintain a fairly constant internal temperature with how they're supposed to be. We have different ways of doing this. Some can adjust their metabolic heat production. Some has to do with insulation, like the penguins. We have the way our circulation works, evaporative cooling, and behavioral responses. Behavioral response is going to be like the iguana knowing it needs to get up on a hot rock, that kind of thing. Now these, I am not going to go over every one of these checkpoint questions because again, I have them here. And if you just, open up the folder titled My PowerPoints, you'll have these exact PowerPoints and it covers them all. Like I said, just kind of doing these really fast. So, scientists observed the fact that these penguins tend to huddle together and they were wondering about it. So they basically came up with their hypotheses and then they tested it out. They used time-lapse photography and then tracked very specific birds so they can see what happened. There you go. I told you I'm totally highlighting this. I'm so sorry. Osmoregulation and excretion. Osmoconformers. These have body fluids with a solute concentration equal to that of the surroundings. So think of when we were talking isotonic. Okay? Osmoregulators have an internal solute concentration that's independent from those of the external environment. If we were actually in class, I would ask you if you could think of an example of either of these. So now we're talking about these. We say that a fish gains water by osmosis. So what type of environment does it live in? Fresh water. Because fresh water is going to be balanced out. The salt water is not going to work the same because of the solutes. And my cats are getting into it over there. You'll just have to hear them. This is a reminder of what we covered in Bio 123. Yes, of course, I'm going to have to say that. When we talked about, when we did the shellless egg lab, I almost said eggless shell lab, the shellless egg lab, and we talked about hypotonic, hypertonic, and isotonic. All right, so when we did that lab, if you remember, we put the shellless egg in the different solutions, and I talked about hypo, hyper, iso. Hypotonic means low solutes. I can't do that word. I can never do that word. Hyper means high solutes, and iso means it's the same. So notice here, hypo has fewer solutes outside of the cell. Hyper, there's more solutes outside the cell. And this one, it's about the same. So there you go. And now I hear an alarm going by like a siren. It's one of those days, huh? Now for the osmoregulation in the water, we have our seawater guy here, and that body is going to take some work because of the amount of salt. The body needs to break it down. So this is the main thing to take away. I'm going to do the laser pointer. This is the main part to take away from this is the saltwater one ends up having a concentrated urine from the kidneys. The freshwater one dilute. That is the main thing that I expect you to take away from that one. On land, we've changed it a little bit more, the way we let stuff out, having to take in the water, that kind of thing, its own stuff. So that brings us to the excretion. Disposal of toxic nitrogenous wastes. We have to get this out of our body. That's why it leaves. We have ammonia, which is poisonous but soluble, easily disposed of by aquatic animals. Then we have urea and uric acid. These are less toxic and easier to store, but require significant energy to produce. So, uric acid is water insoluble. Water does not dilute it. Again, this is one of those. In class, I then ask you if you can think of an example. And then on occasion, somebody does. Most of the time, people don't. And then I point out birds. Birds, uric acid. This is why if a bird flies over when you're driving and they drop their waste product, we'll just word it that way, on your windshield, when you first start driving, you're like, and then you pull the thing, you do your wipers and the stuff, and then it smears all over the place. It is because it is not water soluble, and so all you do is smear it. It only takes a couple of times before most people learn when a bird craps on your window, you just wait, because after it dries, it's so much easier to knock it off. But that's why, just so you know. All right, this one, kind of cool. It's a jellyfish, and their waste product just diffuses right across. Showing you the difference, we've got ammonia for the aquatic animals, uric acid again for the birds, and then of course reptiles, insects, snails. Now, insects, this is also why if the insect goes poof into your windshield, it smears when you try to wash it right off. It's because when it smashes, all of its waste product goes all over your windshield. And then urea, this is us. This is where we are. And look at that, sharks. Sharks are here too. So we have something in common with sharks. Makes me so happy. I like sharks. All right, we have a checkpoint question. We've got our answer. It talks about all of that stuff. Urinary system's playing a central role in homeostasis because it's trying to keep everything balanced in order to go out. Your body, we've mentioned it before, uses the kidneys and your liver to clean your blood. So that's why you're going to see the aorta is hooked up here, and it comes all the way down. And I previously mentioned the inferior vena cava, and that's what it's pointing to here because that's coming up from our the kidney area. So we have our kidneys, we have the ureter, we have the bladder, and then we have the urethra. Those four things I ask on the test every single time, just so you know. Now, they take this picture of the kidney, they break it open so you can see how it's all broken down. It is very specific. And then inside each of these, you have this. This is how your entire kidney is processing everything. We're going to have another image in just a second. Notice that the top is called the renal cortex, the bottom is the renal medulla. The reason I'm going to point this out, we have renal medulla, we have renal cortex, we have renal artery, we have renal vein, we have renal pelvis. Why am I mentioning all these different renal things? Well, it's because when somebody has major kidney issues, more often than not, they will end up saying complete renal failure. If you notice, everything in there is named renal pretty much. Complete renal failure means the entire kidney is shut down. So this one is just trying to show you step through how it's taking it. So the blood, along with all of its stuff, goes in there, it goes through the loop. It's using a countercurrent thing, similar to how it works for the fish with the gills, but it's pulling it out into the kidney so then it can send it on down the ureter to the bladder. No, I'm not going to ask you about every single one of these, but taking a look, not a bad idea. So again, it's going to filter. Well, when it says nephrons extract it, filtrate from the blood and refine it into urine, this is what I was telling you. It's just straight up. It's going through there. The kidneys are pulling the stuff out in order to filter it. They're taking out what they don't need. What is supposed to stay in the body gets reabsorbed, and so that is how we stay relatively hydrated. Since it's constantly going through this, it's always pulling back out some of the liquid. When you don't drink enough or you wait too long to pee, and you notice that when you pee, it smells a lot stronger, it's more yellow, a lot of times it's more acidic, it's because of your body has reabsorbed too much and it's too highly concentrated. This is why a lot of times doctors will tell you to take a look at the color of your urine. If it's bright yellow or brownish or any of those things, something's out of whack, basically. If it's pretty clear, then normally you're pretty well hydrated. It doesn't mean you have no issues. It just means you're pretty hydrated. The other thing I mentioned, and it's probably mentioned later in one of these other parts, but I'm doing it now because I'm talking about pee. What I like to make sure every class knows is if you go to the bathroom and you pee and it smells like Frosted Flakes, and I know that sounds very random, but if it smells like Frosted Flakes, you need to go get checked. What I mean by that is Frosted Flakes are very sugary. It has a very distinctive scent. When your kidneys are doing their job and they're clearing the other stuff out, if you are diabetic or pre-diabetic, your body is dumping too much sugar into your urine. And that is one of the first warning signs. If you go to the bathroom and it smells sweet, that means your body is kicking out too much glucose, too much sugar, and it is a warning sign. And then if you go to the doctor right away and get checked out, if it's pre-diabetic, then they can help you make adjustments and you can keep yourself from becoming fully diabetic. If you are diabetic and you just never knew this, this is a way to get checked and know that you are diabetic and start making the proper lifestyle adjustments, because I've told you about my friend and I don't want anyone else to get to go as downhill as he has. So main thing here is When you pee, during excretion, it leaves the kidneys through the ureters, goes to the bladder, and then out the urethra. So kidneys, ureters are the tubes, to the bladder, which is like the holding tank, and then out the urethra, and presumably into a toilet. This is just trying to show you again the way it's working. So from the renal artery, it brings in the blood. Remember, artery away, so that's coming away from the heart, nice and full, goes through the Bowman's capsule, which we saw a closer picture of. The filtrate, so the water and all the tiny things are coming through here. You have the reabsorption taking place, you have the secretion taking place, all the way out here. So then it comes back through the blood. So it's an entire process. This is why replacing a kidney is not an easy thing. So again, I have all the answers in here so you can remember. More details about the way it works. Again, not going into detail. You need to go over this on your own time because I warned you beforehand, I can't cover everything, and I definitely can't cover it all today. So antidiuretic hormone, I normally share a funny story about this in class, but I'm not doing that on video. No, sorry, Bob, I'm not. So if you watch this and you want to know, just ask in class. I'll totally answer the question. So this is a hormone that regulates the amount of water that's excreted by the kidneys. I was trying to see real quick what the checkpoint question was. One of the things I normally tell people about the ADH, this is the reason why if you go and you have something to drink, and I mean alcoholic wise, or you can even, talk about drinking coffee because it does the same thing, but you do one of those things, what happens is it mucks about with your ADH. This is why you can have a couple of shots this size and then go to the bathroom and pee what feels like this much. You end up wondering, how in the world am I drinking the equivalent of 4 ounces, but it feels like I'm peeing out a 16-ounce bottle of something. This is why. It's because it overtaxes the antidiuretic hormone and your kidneys start pumping more out. This is also how you end up getting more dehydrated when you are drinking. So there you go. Kidney failure. This can result from hypertension, diabetes, or prolonged use of certain drugs, including alcohol. I mentioned in class about the show Family Guy and them making a reference. They have a scene in a bar and they talk about having a drink and it's called the kidney killer. This is why. Because alcohol can kill your kidneys. So if you do not have healthy kidneys, you should not be drinking alcohol. That's just a fact. Hypertension, that means the high blood pressure. I've mentioned before that my mom, 77, she's in stage 3 kidney failure or kidney disease. And I have been doing a whole lot of studies on all of that to help her curtail her diet to put as little stress on her kidneys as possible, because if instead of saying, well, I don't want to change anything, if you actually commit to changing your lifestyle habits, what you eat, what you consume, how you do it, and you stay vigilant on this, you can actually reverse some of the kidney disease up to a certain point. Once you pass a certain spot, there's no going back. So we are trying not to let her get there because I don't want her on dialysis. I don't think she would do well. Which brings me to dialysis. Dialysis is a machine that's going to remove the waste from your blood. If your kidneys are helping clean your blood and your kidneys are shut down, it can't clean the waste products out. So what happens with the dialysis machine, I think they have a picture, yeah. They hook this huge friggin' needle up into your arm, and then another one. It pulls the blood out of your system, goes through this machine where it does all this filtering, and then it comes back into your body cleaned up. You're like, yay. So it basically does the job of what your kidney is supposed to do. However, it's not an easy thing. It's very exhausting, very time consuming. And a good friend of mine, when I first met him, he was on the donation list waiting for a new kidney. And I learned all about this stuff through him because he was always getting the dialysis. He had to get dialysis treatments 3 times a week and it took about 4 hours for each time, and it would just straight up exhaust him. I think we talked about donating plasma in class, and we were talking about how tired it makes you feel and how you're like, ugh, because you're just exhausted. Dialysis is even more taxing. It's exhausting, and it is not a way to try to live your entire life. It is a temporary solution until you find a more permanent solution, like a new kidney. So you do not want to get on dialysis. I have a lot of stories about the dialysis stuff. Okay, that is this chapter. Trying to go through. This one, I remind you it's important, but you also need to remember the urethra is what comes out. I ask you about this every single time. Whew, I'm going to have some edits in this sucker, aren't I? Okay, so that is chapter 25. Now, dum dum da dum. All right, so cat walked across, knocked stuff over, scared the cat. Then I couldn't pick things up because I'm very klutzy today. And I went ahead and started up on chapter 26 because I told you I'm like trying to knock this crap out. I don't even know what time it is yet. Whew. I'm trying to get all this done, processed, uploaded, and packed and out the door in less than an hour. So without further ado, let's talk about hormones in the endocrine system. All right. Endocrine. The disruptors are toxic chemicals that interfere with the endocrine system. The endocrine disruptors include things in weed killers and stuff like that. If you remember, I gave you a question recently. I think it was this class. I don't know. I think I might teach a few many classes, and so I can't always remember who I asked what from, but I'm pretty sure it was this class. But anyway, there's this thing in a bunch of weed killers like Roundup that end up getting into the water runoff, gets into your groundwater, and then people drink it. And it's messing up the endocrine system. And so a lot of companies, a lot of people are saying it's worth it because we can grow more food, without linking the fact that you might be growing more food, but you're poisoning more people. So where is your, what's your trade-off? Do you want to make a whole lot of people sicker and sicker and cause cancer? Because it does. Or do you want to make more? And it's not a starvation versus disease and death, because there is actually a lot of food out there. It's just, well, that's a whole different story. That's going into socioeconomics and stuff. So pull myself back in over here. So I'm stopping now. Then we have our BPA, which is used in a bunch of plastics that line bottles, canned goods, and different things like that. This is also toxic. This is not good. This is why you see now when you get different bottles like this, they will tell you it's BPA free, and that is so you know this is safe. When you buy those really cheap bottles of water, and then a lot of people will keep reusing the same bottle over and over again. Some people leave them in their car. Some people freeze them and thaw them. Every time you do that, you're breaking it down a little bit more, and you're leaching more of that BPA into the water, and then you are consuming it. And so you are actually bringing your own endocrine system down because of, bad practices. So seriously, this kind of thing, smartest thing you can do for your water. And then here it's talking about the effects on animal endocrine systems. I actually have articles on this that I make my students in the environmental science class for South Georgia State College. They have to read about this. So, all right, the nature of chemical regulation, the vertebrate endocrine system, and hormones and homeostasis. All right. The endocrine system, a group of interacting glands and tissues that produce and secrete chemical signals called hormones. This is what's keeping your whole body in check. Now, most of the time when you say hormones, the average person just automatically thinks of puberty and sex hormones. But in reality, your body is full of a whole bunch of different types of hormones to keep everything in check. Melatonin. Most people know about melatonin. You can take it. It's supposed to be a healthy alternative. It can help you sleep, blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying it's not a good thing. It's just, it's touted as the healthy alternative. And it's because it's natural to your body because it is a hormone. So melatonin is naturally produced by your body as a hormone to help you sleep. That's why if you are having a small issue of calming and going to sleep, the average person can take melatonin and they can sleep. And I word it that way because it doesn't work for everyone. If you have like real, actual, true sleep issues, it still doesn't work. So, yeah, these are just going to be things trying to show you the way the stuff works. I highly recommend checking it out, but I'm not covering it right now because, again, I'm trying to knock through this crap. So, hormone signaling involves 3 stages. We have the reception, then we have the signal, and then we have the response. I am simplifying it to that degree. Again, take a look. We have different chemical properties. So the hormones can be broken down into 2 different groups. We have water-soluble hormones, and then we have lipid-soluble hormones. So the water-soluble, right there, needs water. Most hormones produced by the endocrine glands are water-soluble, so that's good. The lipid-soluble hormones include the steroid hormones. So these are small molecules made from cholesterol. And again, I mentioned this previously, but I can't remember if it's bio 123 or 124 when you talk about cholesterols and stuff, that steroids, when you say steroid hormone, I am not referring to specifically steroids like, and then I'm going to bulk up. But that's honestly how they came up with using steroids to bulk up, is because, again, it's a naturally occurring thing in your body, but misusing it, you have damage. And that's pretty much the long story short thing here is hormones, properly balanced, does everything it's supposed to, but pretty much all of them can go out of whack. There you go. Yes, I'm just skipping on over these things. It's showing you the water-soluble hormone versus the lipid-soluble hormone. Already talked about the BPA stuff and that those are endocrine disruptors, so that can mess everything up. And if you're paying attention, remember the endocrine system is basically your hormones. So that means you're mucking about with your hormones when you are not paying attention to this. So anybody who actually said in their critical thinking weekly writing, assuming it was this class, that the benefits of using the pesticide to grow more food, you are willing to do that, you are now saying that it is okay to muck about with everybody's hormones, including your own, because you can't get away from your groundwater. You can't. If somebody pollutes the water that's down in the aquifer, that's the groundwater, that's what's coming up, you can say, but I only drink bottled water. You better know where that bottled water is coming from. A lot of it's not actually regulated. And 2, if you're still using regular water to say, boil and cook with, or make your coffee with, make your ice cubes with, brush your teeth, take your shower, you're still consuming it. You are still absorbing it. And that's honestly one of the things that cracks me up is the number of people who go, well, I only use bottled water. And I watch as they fill their coffee machine up from the tap, or they make ice cubes. That's my favorite. They use crappy tap water to make their ice cubes, put the ice cubes in their drink. It's melting in there all the same time while the person insists how they never use regular water. And dude, just protect your water source, come on. Or if you're that nervous, get a filtration system for your house and make sure everything's filled with that. So this is talking all about the weed killer and what it was doing to the male frogs. Notice here, demasculinizes male frogs. Oh my gosh, if you want some interesting articles, look up the effects of the plastics and the BPA stuff on a human penis. It totally messes it up. I actually, in Valdosta, the friend I mentioned who is a lab manager in the University of Florida, before she started studying the stuff in order to try to make a vaccine for brain cancer, she was actually studying the effects of the plastic and the hormone system. And I brought her in, and for the longest time, all of my students always referred to her as that penis lady, because she had this one slide that showed all these different things that could happen to a baby's penis just from the mom drinking the water and stuff. So it was really interesting. So totally Google that. It's fascinating. All right, vertebrate endocrine system consists of more than a dozen major glands. So we have the endocrine glands. The thyroid is one of those. There's a lot of people who say they have thyroid issues, and then there are people who really have thyroid issues. When somebody keeps gaining weight and they insist that they're perfectly healthy, normally they do get their thyroid checked, because if the thyroid is out of whack, it's knocking out some of the hormones, which can cause weight gain. But that's not the most common. We are going to see a thing about goiters, which is one of the more common things that you'll see with a messed up thyroid. Oh, and the weird bug eye thing. I don't know if anyone's seen that. Sometimes a thyroid condition, when somebody opens their eyes, it's like the eyelid goes way back. It looks like the eyes are popping out. It's fascinating, and I wish I could remember the name of it. Anyway, other glands like the pancreas have endocrine and non-endocrine functions, so it does both. And then you have other organs that have nothing to do with the endocrine system at all, like your heart. So we are about to have a figure, apparently, that shows the major endocrine glands and the main hormones they produce. There you go. So here are our main endocrine glands and their hormones. Most of these you're already going to know about, because we know ovaries and testes and things like that. You've heard of the thyroid, and you've probably heard about the adrenal glands, because, you know, when somebody says they're an adrenaline junkie, that's what this is coming from. That's when you're like, whoa, because you're so excited and stuff. Pancreas, you've probably heard a little bit about, maybe. The one I always end up pointing out here is the hypothalamus. This is the part that's in your brain, and there's the pineal gland. And see, there's the melatonin that I was talking about. Hypothalamus is in your brain, and previously, in the previous textbook, we would have already gone through all the parts of the brain by now. And so I would have already talked about it. So this one's just talking about, again, the different glands, the hormones, and asking you details. Hypothalamus, it's my thing. And I'm a little partial to the hypothalamus. I know it sounds funny to be partial to something like this, but you've met me. You should be used to this by now. But my youngest had this issue when he was little. And it was like doing this little twitch thing. And had to go to a neurologist and got all the little things all over the head to do the scan. And in order to make it a little more comfortable, I got this big stuffed animal, polar bear, so cute. And we looked at a diagram of the brain to pick a name. And so we have a bear stuffed animal that is named Thalamus in my house. So hypothalamus is just an extra part, but there is actually a part called thalamus in your brain. And it was so cute, because when the neurologist comes in and says, oh, so what's your bear's name? And then Jacob goes, Thalamus. The neurologist's eyes just kind of popped open. It was kind of cute. Anyway, so your hypothalamus is the main control center of your endocrine system. I swear I was looking at the word and was blanking on the word at the same time. I really need more sleep. Anyway, this is the one that receives the information from the nerves. It sends out the appropriate nervous or endocrine signals and directly controls the pituitary gland, which is huge because this secretes the hormones that influence a whole bunch of parts of the body. So here we go. We've got our hypothalamus way up here. See, that's where it is in the brain, right there at the base of the brain. And then we have the anterior and the posterior pituitary. And then we've got the bone protecting, and that's what it's showing you. Anterior means it's towards the front. Posterior means it's towards the back. That's all that means. Pituitary gland. We have, again, the posterior and the anterior. Yeah, that's all I really need to say for that one. Showing you again to give you an example, though. So what happens here is, well, the ADH, that's the antidiuretic hormone. So if it says to the kidneys, oh my gosh, you need to be working, you've got to pee. That goes here. Oxytocin. This, it's not OxyContin, it's oxytocin, totally different thing. But this is what causes the contractions and stuff inside a mammal. We're going to have a picture about a pig that talks about that later. And then here's showing you a bunch of the other pituitary hormones that come out. Yeah. Here's another one about hormones, the growth hormone. If you are a giant, like literally diagnosed gigantism, look how tall this dude is. Like, woo, this is an average sized female. This is this guy. It means that you had an overabundance of growth hormone come popping out. Now, I wish they still had these pictures in the PowerPoint for me to use, because normally when I talk about this, I also talk about the dangers of excess growth hormone as an adult. Sometimes when a child is in the lower percentile for height, they'll do a hormone test, they'll find out that the child is low on growth hormones. And then they can supplement, and then, they grow taller. If it is I forgot the name. Achondroplasia. I think that's it. That's dwarfism. That is not a growth hormone thing. That is a completely separate thing. So a growth hormone is not going to help somebody who is genetically has a dwarfism, a little person. If it is a growth hormone deficiency, then it will help. Now, I've made comments about watching all of those really stupid infomercials about weight loss. There's one that's out a whole lot constantly. It's been going around for probably about a year and a half or so by now, where they talk about when you were younger, you had all this energy and you could burn off fat like this and you were not tired and blah, 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 blah. But then when you hit your 30s, you start gaining weight and you're so tired. Do you know what there's a lack of? And then they try to point out that you are producing less growth hormones as you get older. This is true. That is factual. Here's where it goes badly. This company then says all you have to do is consume our product, which contains human growth hormones, and that will help make you feel younger, look younger, and lose those extra pounds that you've been trying to get rid of, all because of the growth hormone. Yes and no. It may help you with dropping some weight and everything. However, if you are adding growth hormone to your body and your body is not needing the growth hormone, it continues trying to do stuff, and you end up with these horribly swollen joints. You want to say rheumatoid arthritis looks bad, this stuff looks horrible. So I would recommend Googling that. Googling the effects of overabundance of human growth hormone as an adult. And if you look at that, it will make you realize that those types of weight loss products, it's horrible. People, no. All right, hormones and homeostasis. Hopefully you remember homeostasis is staying balanced. So this is all about the stuff that's trying to keep your body in balance. So that brings us to the thyroid. I mentioned at the beginning that the thyroid, if somebody gets really big, they try to say, it might be due to the thyroid, and it's because it messes up with your metabolism. Your thyroid keeps your metabolism where it's supposed to be. But if your thyroid is not functioning properly, it might give you a hypermetabolism, which means you are super skinny and you cannot gain weight. Or a hypometabolism, which means it's very, very low. And so it's like your body is very sluggish about breaking things down. And so there you go. I had to keep it because it's a frog. This is a tadpole. This is what I was talking about, how right in front of you, it starts growing its legs and it starts to shrink its tail and it turns into a frog. It's really cool. Anyway, thyroid regulates the development and metabolism. Already said this. I talked about hyperthyroidism right there. High blood pressure, loss of weight, overheating, and irritability. Hypothyroidism, lower blood pressure, being overweight, and often feeling cold and lethargic. Lethargic just means you're so friggin' tired. Another thing, however, that can add to the lethargy is a low iron count. And so if you find that you're just like, you're getting the sleep, you're eating, but you're just all the time, check your iron count. It's really helpful. If you're female, you're menstruating, that kind of stuff. So each time that rolls around in the month and you're just feeling really low, you're losing a lot of iron. If you can up your iron intake, that would help. Okay, now iodine deficiency can produce a goiter, which is an enlargement of the thyroid. That's why you see it like right there. That is why, honestly, they started adding iodine to a lot of salt. That's why if you get the regular table salt, it says iodized salt. It's because so many people were not consuming enough iodine. This became an easy way to get iodine into the diet. So while people sit there and say, have the pink Himalayan salt or the sea salt or the this salt or the that salt, also keep track of the rest. You don't need to oversalt things. That's not healthy. But if you're not consuming iodine, this is a way to get the iodine into your system. This is also why if somebody is allergic to iodine, they need to keep track of what they're consuming. Now, I don't know much about the pink Himalayan salt other than I know a lot of people who really like it. Sea salt, actual sea salt, I have that as well, and kosher salt. But sea salt, being sea salt, actually has some iodine in it naturally. So you can actually take care of it there. So there you go. So this is showing you right here, if your thyroid, you have the no iodine, insufficient thyroid hormone produced, and then it keeps this whole long thing going, and then you've got that big old goiter. Used to have a picture, apparently I don't now. That's not good. This is talking about for a pregnant woman and hyperthyroidism. Now we're getting to the sex hormones. Sex hormones are not just for sex, but this is for everything that makes you the genetic / birth sex that you are. I don't know how else to phrase it because this is biology. And so I'm going by biology. And so when I am referring to sex or gender stuff, that kind of thing, forgive me if I go astray or I say something not appropriate, because I really am just talking straight up biology. I'm not talking about how somebody feels or what they identify as. I'm not trying to minimize that in any way, shape, or form. I'm just trying to cover the actual biology aspect of it. I just had this huge talk yesterday with a couple of people about trans stuff, and so I'm trying to be more conscious. It's just when talking biology, it gets hard. So I just like to go ahead and tell people I'm just talking biology. So sorry. Anyway, estrogens, proestrogen, and androgens. Androgens also include the testosterone. These are all steroid sex hormones that are produced by the gonads in response to signals from, again, the hypothalamus and the pituitary. So these release the hormones that are needed through the gonads and then to the sex hormones. And I'm just skipping right on past this checkpoint question too. Pancreas is helping out with this stuff. It has digestive enzymes for the small intestines, and then it also secretes 2 protein hormones, insulin and glucagon. Both of these are said to be antagonistic hormones because the effects one has against the other. So this is where we get into that homeostasis thing, because if there's too much of this, then this one kicks in to bring that level down so they can stay balanced. That's pretty much what it is. That's why if someone's diabetic and the insulin isn't working, you take the insulin in order to adjust it. So here's how it works. This is, if you look at the book PowerPoints, I think this was a series of like 5 slides. I just put them all in together. But similar to how I talked before about the negative feedback with temperature, you know, you're too hot and your body goes, oh my gosh, it's so hot. And then the pores open, you sweat, it releases the heat so it can balance. This is another example. So say that you eat something super, super duper sugary. Your body goes, whew, that is a lot of sugar. And so it throws out a bunch of insulin. The insulin is there to break down the sugar so then your body can, you know, do it nicely. It can just balance and then it does what it's supposed to do. Then when it gets down to a certain level, then we've got the glucagon that helps, you know, bring it right on back up. The other way is your blood sugar level is too low. The glucagon goes, that's not good. We are too low. And so it throws something out there to try to bring the sugar level back up. This is what the different treatments for diabetes are set on. And I just totally blanked because I remembered we're about to cover hypo and hyper and all that stuff. So diabetes, a serious hormonal disorder caused by the body's inability to produce or use insulin. When your body can't produce or can't use the insulin, it means your body can't burn off the sugar. So the result of diabetes is an elevated blood glucose level, which is called hyperglycemia. So this means that the body is constantly has too much sugar in it. Hypoglycemia is where there's too much insulin in the blood when the sugar's eaten, and so due to this, the blood glucose levels drop well below normal. So imagine constantly falling with way down low, so you're just like exhausted. My ex-husband was one of these and my mom was the other, and I worked with both of them, and oh my gosh, was it exhausting. I had to make sure everybody stayed fed at all times. Now, comparison of type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Type 1, previously thought of as juvenile diabetes, but now we don't say juvenile diabetes. But type 1 diabetes means your body is just simply not producing insulin. This is helped by regular, being able to do the insulin shots. Or if you know someone who is severe type 1 diabetic, they can have the insulin pump. And that's something that's just attached on them, and so it's constantly regulating and pumping out a little bit of insulin so their body can work as close to normal as possible. Type 2, this is the one that normally shows up later in life and normally tends to be attached to people who are obese or very poor diets, that kind of thing. This is where your body has gotten to where it is insulin resistant. So your body no longer really wants to take the insulin. It's like, yeah, who cares? I don't want you anymore. And it's because it's been like bombarded. That's why normally it's more of an obesity issue when it shows up. But it's if you have consumed so much sugar in your lifetime that your body has just gotten used to it always being at this level, it stops paying attention. So this kind of diabetic, if you know anyone who has type 2, this is the kind who normally when they go out to eat, before they eat or whatever, they do the quick little punk, and then they test, and then they have 2 syringes. And they look at what the little thing says, and then they're like, okay, so I shoot this one first, and then I shoot that one. Because what they're doing is the first shot is basically telling their body to accept the insulin that is coming next. And then they throw the insulin in, so they are keeping it perfectly balanced in order to try to keep their levels straight. So there you go. This is some more stuff. This is the one I'm going to go to right here, the ephedrine and norepinephrine. So we have ephedrine and norepinephrine, which quickly trigger the fight or flight response. Normally I talk about this when we talk about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, but I'm going to go ahead and mention it real quick. But assume we're still going to get to the sympathetic and parasympathetic in a couple of chapters. What happens here? It drives me nuts when textbooks and people in general refer to fight or flight, because they seem to keep forgetting the third step. There is fight, flight, or freeze. It's actually three things that your body does. You have some people who get startled real easily. That's normally going to be the, those are the flight people. So like if you go to a haunted house or something like that, and somebody jumps out and you go, ah, and you still think it's funny later because you weren't actually having any issues, but you do that. That tends to be the flight. Those are the ones that like take off running. So like if you come up on a bunny rabbit, they take off. Fight, I fall under that category. When I'm startled, I will actually start to pull my arm back because there's all of my stuff and everything. I respond with, I am more likely to attack you because I am not going down, basically. I'm very stubborn and I'm very protective. And so when I have had it, I don't do haunted houses and stuff like that because the few times I did, I either hit or almost hit the poor person who's just working. It's not their fault. They're doing their job. But my startle reaction is to pull my arm back and punch. Kind of funny because apparently you just have to do it once and then they alert everybody else in the area and you'll see everyone just like part as you walk through. So it's kind of funny, but not recommended because you feel bad. But there's also the entire huge group of people or animals that freeze. My example for this will be a deer. If you are driving down the road and a deer is crossing the road and you come up, it just freezes. Like that, it just does nothing. And it's not that it's thinking, oh, they'll just go past me. They're not, they just freeze. And a lot of people do this as well. If you have ever been like driving and you see an accident happening in front of you, some people immediately slam on that brake. Some people will gun it and then like turn and they're like, whoo, and they're figuring out how to miss it. But you have those couple of people who just kind of freeze in place for just a second because the initial response is freeze. Nothing wrong with it. It's just another way that your body works. And I find it interesting. But again, I'm going to cover all of that when we get to the parasympathetic and sympathetic areas. So here we go. This one. ACTH from the pituitary cause the adrenal cortex to secrete glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids, which boost blood pressure and energy in response to long-term stress. These are other things you will see in those weight loss commercials because they will point out that this causes weight gain. And it's because your body is staying like this at all times. This is where my body lives. But your body is staying like this and it takes energy to keep you like, Urgh! And so your body kind of, you hold on to more weight. And that's what this is telling you about. So this is talking to you about the effects of each of these different things. Take a look, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's all I'm going for that one. Skipping on past the checkpoint questions because you can look at that too. Same chemical signal can have different effects in different animals, which is kind of cool. So in humans, the hormone prolactin will stimulate the mammary glands to grow and produce milk. So this is how a mom can breastfeed her child. If the more she is feeding her child, the more her body is producing the milk, so the more milk that is produced for the health of the child. If the mom is not feeding the baby on a regular schedule, her body is not producing the milk at the same level, and that's normally when it starts to get a little funky, and then you start supplementing with some kind of formula. But in some non-human mammals, this will stimulate nest building. So when it starts to build up, instead of building up the breast milk, it might cause them to start doing what they call nesting. This one is showing you that suckling promotes the production of prolactin. So this is the picture at the very beginning of this PowerPoint. In birds, the PRL regulates fat metabolism and reproduction. In amphibians, stimulates the movement towards water because, well, they have to have their babies in the water. And then in fish, like salmon, it's what makes them, go up the river to, reproduce. My cat is rubbing its face against my water bottle, so if it funks in just a moment, that'll be why. So, hormones can promote social behaviors, go figure, like we didn't know this already, but yeah, it does. So scientists, of course, have been studying this. And one of the things they've been studying is the hormone oxytocin and the human-dog relationship. Oxytocin plays a part in uterine contractions and mammary milk ejection and promotes maternal bonds. So this means it makes things kind of cramp up, for lack of a better phrase. So this can be to cause contractions to begin. It can help with the birth, but it can also help with the contractions to help shrink it back up. Mammary milk ejection, again, that's for breastfeeding, and promotes the maternal bond. That's the big one there. So levels of the hormone rise when the mothers gaze into the eyes of their baby. So when mommy looks at baby, it honestly brings up the hormone. And it turns out when dog owners receive the long gaze from their dogs, it does the same thing. So if anybody out there has ever been a pet owner, if you've had a dog, if you ever lost the dog, like the dog passed away and you grieved, it's a real thing. They say that when you grieve a person who is really bonded to their dog, it is almost like the loss of your child. And yeah, it's huge. I'll tell you all about my dog Hubcap one day. Yes, his name was Hubcap. They did actual studies for the hormone levels with this, which I thought was kind of interesting. And there you go. And here's the dog staring, just staring at you, trying to raise those levels for you. That's it for that chapter. All right. Last chapter. I told you I'm slamming all this stuff together. It's one big friggin' video. This one is reproduction and embryonic development. Man, this one I'm going to do like this. It's the longer one, but I'm going to highlight it because a lot of this was covered in 1, 2, 3. A lot of this you already know. Most of this I'm going to tell you, you need to read it anyway. So here we go. We're going to end up talking about STIs. You probably grew up, or I did, that they were called STDs because we heard sexually transmitted disease. But this is also sexually transmitted infection because not all of them are actually disease. And they are completely and totally preventable if you pay attention. So it's going to talk about asexual and sexual reproduction, human reproduction, embryonic development, which you saw some of at the very beginning of the quarter, and human development. So reproduction is just exactly that. It's making new individuals. There's asexual, which means not having sex. And so you can do budding, fission, fragment, whatever. That would be asexual reproduction. This helps one individual produce as many offspring as it's needed to quickly. However, it does not change anything in the genetic code. Kept this because I just thought this was interesting. This is a sea urchin reproducing. It's just basically stretching out and then pinching off. That's why it's fission, just shoop. So pretty interesting. Sexual reproduction is the one you are probably most familiar with. This is fertilization. When we cover genetics, we also talked about this. So humans, well, I shouldn't say humans. I'm saying humans because that's right where your brain tends to go. But anything that uses sexual reproduction, you have gametes. So you have sperm and you have egg. The sperm is the male gamete. The egg is the female gamete. When the egg and the sperm come together, each of those were haploids, so represented by this N. It means they had one set of chromosomes. When the sperm and the egg meet, that becomes a diploid, so 2N. When it first comes together, that is a zygote. And then it grows from there. So again, checkpoint questions. We are now to human reproduction. Woman has ovaries, and oviducts conveys the egg to the uterus where the embryo develops. The egg, as soon as, like throughout puberty, past puberty, the human female drops an egg in her body about once a month, about, give or take. That's pretty much what the entire female cycle is based about, is the female body kicks out the egg hangs out there, waits to find out whether or not it's going to have a sperm attached to it. If a sperm does not bind with it, then it goes okay, and it gets chucked out, and then it starts all over again. So we've got our ovaries right here, and then when it drops the egg, it goes through the tubes and then to the uterus. If it becomes fertilized, this is where it will attach, is into the wall of the uterus, and then that is where the baby will grow. This is showing you the side view so you can see. And here's the main thing I tend to point out. One, this is the uterus. This is where the baby would grow. Cervix, this is the part that they're constantly checking on during labor. And I just noticed that the top of my words are missing, but this is where they're constantly checking to see the opening of the cervix. And they'll be like, oh, you're 1 centimeter, you're 2 centimeters, and that kind of thing. 10 centimeters is when it's time to have the baby. So that's the part they're checking. Here's the other part I like to show. This is where the bladder is. Notice the bladder and the uterus, two totally different places. The uterus is pressing on the bladder, so anyone who makes fun of a pregnant woman having to pee doesn't really understand. The baby is literally on the bladder. Okay? Notice here is the urethra. This is where the pee comes out. This is the vaginal opening. This is where baby comes out. These are two different locations. I point this out because a lot of people seem to not quite understand that. So I just wanted to point that out. All right. Now for the male, we have testes. We've got the scrotum. Vas deferens. This is the part to pay attention to here because this is the part included when you talk about a vasectomy. That's why it's a vasectomy. This is where they're snipping. They are not taking away your testes. They are not removing anything. You still ejaculate just like anybody else, but if this has been cut, it just makes it where the sperm doesn't reach there. Everything else gets there, just not the little swimmers. There you go. Human penis consists mainly of cylinders of erectile tissue that can fill with blood to cause an erection during sexual arousal. I've talked about this before in class, that it's just blood flow. That's why anything that affects your blood pressure and your blood flow, your circulation, will affect whether or not you can obtain an erection. So here, where this is different than the female, is notice that the bladder is connected to everything. So you have, this is where the sperm is going to come from. Sperm's created here, comes up here, and then comes out there. So if you have a vasectomy, they're just snipping these little tubes. Testes remain perfectly normal. All of the rest of this perfectly normal. It just literally keeps the actual sperm from coming up. The main thing to notice is here, the urethra. The urethra is the only exit chute. I don't know what else to say. I'm so sorry. The only part that comes out. And so ejaculate and urine both use the same hole. Side view, trying to show you exactly the same thing. Again, here's the vas deferens. Yes, I'm going to say this over and over again about vasectomies because anyone who wants to assure that they are finished having kids, they don't want to have any more children, blah, blah, blah. This is the best way to do it. It's a lot less invasive than having a woman go get her tubes tied. This is so much easier to do and it's a lot faster to heal. Just reminding you that the hypothalamus is kicking all these hormones in gear. Talking about how the sperm is made and how the egg is made. I already told you females once a month. She has the oocyte form. There's one primary, one secondary. The secondary is just kind of dumped off. The primary is nice and big. That's so if it ever gets fertilized, that's what will become the actual baby. This is showing you how the sperm is created and why they are each just one single cell. They're all haploids, because when you covered mitosis and meiosis in Bio 1, 2, 3, we talked about all this. Again, showing you how that works. This is talking about the ovarian cycle and the menstrual cycle. The ovarian cycle is basically when your body is dropping, well, when a female's body is dropping an egg to be ready to reproduce. And the menstrual cycle is when the body is getting rid of the egg that was never used. And so everything's just kind of based around that. Where I said about once a month, here they're pointing out approximately every 28 days, the hypothalamus is going to signal the body to drop these certain hormones. One hormone makes everything get ready. The other hormone gets rid of everything. So these stimulate the endometrium to thicken, preparing the uterus for implantation. So this is why some women during ovulation get cramps. It's because the body is trying to work on thickening. So it's thickening the walls. I normally describe this as basically getting the nursery ready. So the ovulation time period with these hormones, it's like you're going in there and you're putting up the wallpaper and you're putting up the curtains, you're getting the little crib ready and stuff like that. And then you come around and there's no baby, and some women, their body is like, okay, there's no baby, and they take the wallpaper and the curtains down and they just chuck it out. Other people, it's like, I can't believe there's no child. It's ripping that wallpaper off the walls and it hurts. So some women have severe cramps. Not taking that away from you. I am fortunate I am not one of those women. My sister was. My sister actually had endometriosis, which is where the uterine lining just keeps building up with scar tissue. So that means it was not fully cleaning itself, because this whole area is like a self-cleaning oven. It's supposed to take it off, chuck it out, refresh. Some women's bodies do it nice and gently. Other women's bodies, it's like it throws a friggin' tantrum. Each one's different. However, if you are one of the tantrum ones, they have shown that if you start taking ibuprofen and very much hydrating yourself a couple of days before your cycle is supposed to begin, it massively reduces the cramps. So there you go. Stay hydrated, some ibuprofen. That's everything I just talked about right there. This is showing you the levels, the peaks when the hormones are coming out and what's doing stuff. It's also why, gentlemen, it's not nice to tell ladies that they're just being hormonal, because there's actually biorhythms. If you read the fluctuations for hormones, men actually cycle more often than women, just so you know. Now, we have the sexually transmitted infections. There's a whole bunch. A lot of these can be cured. Some of them quickly are getting where they cannot be cured because of how people are not taking antibiotics properly. It's really terrifying. This one, chlamydia, there's no visible symptoms. The only way you're going to know about this is if you get tested. And you can just keep on passing it on, and it can cause infertility issues. Pretty terrifying. This is the one that kills me. 1 in 5 Americans is infected with genital herpes. Right here, please note. It is a variant of the virus that causes oral cold sores. The reason I point that out is I tell people all the time, all of my students, if you're going to participate in sexual activity, you need to be able to talk about sex with whoever you're going to have sex with. It's not a talk about it. Be honest. And for this one, what I like to point out and make sure people are aware of is check their mouth. If there is a cold sore here, you do not let them go south. Mouth, south, they rhyme for a reason, or at least for me, they rhyme for a reason. Check their mouth. If there's a cold sore here and you let them go down there, you will now become one of the 5 Americans. And if you think it's no big deal because, well, if that many Americans have it, Google it, take a look at what it is, and decide if that's something you really want. Does not look like a comfortable thing. Terrifying me. I am not one of the 5. So, yay! This terrifies me. And the thing is, you can't always see it. So you can't say, oh, well, this person looks clean. This is why safe sex. Abstinence, if you don't know people, if you decide you're going there anyway, then condom. Okay? But I talked about this in Bio 1, 2, 3 as well. Now we have a few different things talking about the disease, major symptoms, and cause treatment. No, some of these don't really have cause and treatment. This one is terrifying. So, and then we have more. We talked about AIDS and HIV just the other day in class. This one is talked about a lot as well, and this one. And this can actually happen due to antibiotics, because this will kill off, you can end up killing off all the good biota. This is naturally in your body anyway. But then if you kill off all your natural good biota that keep it in check, this stuff pops up. It's an opportunistic species. And so this is why if you take antibiotics, whether you're male or female, then you should make sure to be putting the probiotics back in to help. So, contraception, again, this is basically birth control. There's a whole bunch of different types. I covered them all in Bio 1, 2, 3, and I do mean all. So if you have questions, just ask. Okay, embryonic development begins with fertilization. As soon as the egg is fertilized, it begins to form. It becomes the zygote, and then that starts to go through all of its other little stages until we refer to it normally as a fetus. Or if you're me, I am straight up going to say baby, because I love babies. I will call everything a baby. I will even talk about a little tree as a baby. I was having a hard time making that move. Okay, I always keep this picture because I think it's fascinating. Don't ask me how they got the picture. I have no idea. But it does say colorized SEM. That means scanning electron microscope. So I'm not sure how they actually managed to do this, because when I used a scanning electron microscope, I had to dehydrate everything and do all this stuff. So maybe they just froze it in time. But anyway, the egg is being fertilized by sperm. So all these are the different sperm coming at the egg. Now, you have probably heard at one point, everybody's a winner sometime in their life. After all, the egg was fertilized. And people will say the fastest sperm got there, and you won the race and stuff like that. The first sperm to reach the egg is not the one that fertilizes it, just so you know. Whole bunch of sperm are coming out there. That egg is like, nope, you have to prove you are worthy. And finally, one of them will burrow its way in, and it will hit those defenses. It will get past that fence, past that wall, at which point it's almost like the electromagnetic bomb kind of thing. The sperm starts to go in there. As soon as one sperm goes in there, it goes poof, and it just does this big reaction that kills off all the other sperm, which is really cool. That's why one egg cannot, let me repeat that, one egg cannot get fertilized by more than one sperm. Can somebody be carrying 2 different fertilized eggs? Yes, but only one sperm to one egg. Now this is how the sperm looks. We've got the main part, the head of it. There's the nucleus. This is the mitochondria, because remember, the mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell. This is the one giving it its energy. Plasma membranes on the outside, and the flagellum, which is the tail, and that's how that sucker moves. So if you know anyone going through infertility treatments, if someone has issues with sperm, they will tell you that it's either motility or mobility. Sperm motility means that there's not a whole lot of live sperm. Mobility means that they're not very good swimmers. It means those tails don't work so well. Just so you know the terminology. This is breaking it down, how you get to make it to a baby. This is showing you with the frog egg, fertilization. We've got the zygote. So as soon as the 2 are together, it's a zygote. It Then we go cleaving, it goes shink shink and it becomes different things. Then we have the blastula, which is when there's a certain number. We've got this nice little hole here, which is where it's going to form, gastrula, and then the embryo, and that's where the organs are being formed. And then we get to the baby stuff. Ectoderm, ecto is the outside. Endoderm is the inside, meso is the middle. So the ectoderm becomes skin and nervous systems, endoderm becomes the digestive tract, and the mesoderm becomes the muscle and bone because that's in the middle. Breaking it down, embryonic layer, and then the stuff for the adults. Again, showing you how it breaks down, how it works. Then I kept this in here on purpose because I wanted you to see the notochord, because we started the whole quarter out looking at the notochords. So here we go. Right here, because they're starting to fold. This is the notochord right here. So I just think that's kind of interesting. Showing you how it does it, how it forms, blah, blah, blah. Now, apoptosis. Covered this also, yes, in Bio 1, 2, 3. Apoptosis. That's the cell, poof, bursting. It's dying. It's getting rid of itself. It's like, you know what? I'm not reproducing the way I'm supposed to. I'm not replicating the way I'm supposed to. And it goes, poop. I even actually show an Amoeba Sisters video in Bio 1, 2, 3 for this. But the cool thing is this is actually how a lot of your body is developed. Here we go. This is a hand, and then apoptosis makes it where it starts actually forming the individual fingers because it destroyed all of these cells that were here that were holding them together. So that's how apoptosis works in the development. Showing you again here. We've talked about homeotic genes and stuff before, so scooch on past that because you need to read that anyway. Human development. I'm looking at my time. I am past the time I'm supposed to have stopped already. I'm going to be late getting to my mom. Anyway, human development begins with fertilization, which we already know. Placenta. I'm hoping most people have heard about the placenta. Placental mammal. We are a placental mammal. This means that inside the uterus, we've got the placenta that's all wrapped up there to hold the baby. And we're going to have a picture in a minute. We've done a PowerPoint previously where I talked about the amnion, chorion, yolk sac, and the, I cannot say it, alanitos or whatever, but we've covered this before. That's showing you that. So here we go. Around 9 days, we've got the yolk sac, the cavity, the amnion, chorion, all this stuff. Then everything starts to build. So this is the very first little part, then it's all working its way together. You would not be able to tell what the heck this is unless, of course, you're a doctor and you know this. Then finally, it's all here, all of this. So notice where all of this started, it goes in there and it keeps building and building until it is actually the good solid placenta. So this is about 1 month gestation right here. So these are all the mommy's blood vessels. And this is so they can then work its way through with the umbilical cord to give the baby all the nutrients it needs and take away all the waste product from the baby. And this includes oxygen and carbon dioxide, just so you know. Human pregnancy is broken up into trimesters. We have 3 trimesters. So, first trimester is the one where the most changes are taking place. And at 8 weeks, the embryo is then called a fetus, or again, if you're me, baby. The second and third trimesters are when it's growing and getting ready to be born. So here we go. Week 5, this is about what the baby looks like. Week 14, starting to look like an actual little baby. Week 20, it gets almost creepy looking because this baby's like all slammed up in there, ready to come out. And then week 40, about is when baby is born. You have made a actual human being, which is kind of cool. Series of events to get that baby out of the body is called labor. I think most people know this one. Estrogen makes the uterus more sensitive to the oxytocin, which will then initiate labor. So if you remember when I said that it causes the contractions, That's what it's doing. It's like, and so this is forcing the baby out. So I used to make jokes saying it was an eviction process. Baby turns, gets the head down here ready to come out, gets all set up, and then all of this cramps up. So women who have had babies, who have given birth, have been in labor, you know what this part's like. Women who have not actually gone through this and given birth, it's basically like the worst menstrual cramps of your entire life, because it's the exact same muscles working. It's the same kind of contraction. Menstrual cramps are basically like labor light, because it's doing the same thing. It's just clearing it out. So the cervix, which I mentioned earlier, dilates. It gets larger and larger until it's large enough for the baby to come out. This is the part that a lot of people forget to mention, is the fact that you then have the afterbirth. So after the baby's born, the body kicks in higher gear and like seriously does the cramps to rip everything off the walls and throw it out. It is not a comfortable thing, just so you know. About 15% of couples who want kids cannot conceive. After 12 months of trying to have a baby, that is called infertility, at which point normally the couple goes and starts getting tested. Some people will choose to do in vitro fertilization. This is where they collect an egg, they have the sperm, they mix it together, they check it to make sure it's going to be okay. Once it has gotten to this level, then they implant them into the uterus, hoping that they will attach. This is why these used to be called test tube babies. So a test tube baby, if you have ever heard the term, does not mean they grew the baby in a friggin' test tube. It just means they did this and then they implanted it. If you're lucky, the woman's uterus will have one or two of them attach, and then yay, you have babies. If you are unlucky, none of them attach or all of them attach. That can be really horrible. So here I just threw this as a recap because this is the female side, this is the male side. Notice we have haploid, 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 diploid. So there you go. Wow, that was 3 chapters. Unbelievably skimmed the top. So much more to go into, but hey, at least I got it done. You need to do your part and actually go through the chapters and go a little more in depth. Jot down any questions you have, and yeah, I thought of something while I was doing this, and I was like, yeah, that's going to be the hybrid lecture assignment question. And I am trying my hardest to remember what it was, because I think it was in the very first PowerPoint and I made some kind of reference. How about this? The official hybrid assignment thing for this entire video, other than the last 5 to 10 minutes, other than that, anything else where I kind of veered off and just really went into depth about something, tell me about one of those. That way you can pick whatever the heck you want out of those, but just not the past 5 or 10 minutes, because I want it to actually be something in depth, and it's driving me nuts that I can't remember what it was I was talking about at the beginning. Yeah. Oh well. Do your best. Try to do this. I'll see you in class Monday. I'm still updating the human senses lab that we will do on Monday, because I don't know how we can do it with the whole COVID thing. And yeah, hopefully you guys are actually watching the news, reading the news about how bad things are getting, because yeah, it's getting bad. And I want you to actually look at the numbers for decab. That's also getting pretty rough. I'm probably going to post about that, because I need everybody in the class to be taking this seriously and not be removing their mask for any reason whatsoever in the class, not even to take a sip of something. I'd rather you leave the room and do that. We need to stay covered. So there you go. That's my tangent. I'm done. Now I have to process this so then I can get going. There you go. See ya.